The next speaker is Ashling Seely, who's from the ITGLWF, and she's going to be talking about a little bit about the history of the Playfair campaign, because I think it's important that we realise that this is, this hasn't just sprung up overnight. So you can
should I just stay here?
If you want to.
Yes. So the sports good industry, one of the most lucrative industries of all, is controlled by multi-billion retail and merchandising giants. This year, for example, Nike reported a net profit of $1.9 billion. Puma recently signed the biggest athletic sponsorship deal ever with Usain Bolt, reportedly worth £21 million over 4 years. Despite the economic crisis, last year Adidas paid a total of €10.49 million to its executive board members, up from $8.4 million the year before. These companies don't own their own production facilities or employ workers directly, but they subcontract production out to a range of suppliers in low-wage countries, a practice which gives them great flexibility without having to assume the responsibility for the workers who produce the source of their wealth. This combination of power over suppliers without responsibility towards the workforce creates a system in which multinational brands are able to dictate cutthroat prices designed to keep their costs low and their profits high. As a result, those manufacturing sports goods are enduring worse conditions than ever. Workers are actually paid less in real terms than they were 15 years ago. And in many cases, sportswear manufacturing companies are paying workers even less than the local minimum wages. You have to keep in mind that the vast majority of sports goods are made in Asia, in countries where the minimum wage is nowhere even near a living wage. In many countries, the minimum wage will have to be doubled or tripled in order just to meet basic needs. As a result, workers producing sports goods frequently live on less than the UN poverty threshold. T-shirt assembly workers in the Dominican Republic, for example, receive only 8 cents to assemble a T-shirt that sells in the US for $22.99. If those workers' wages were to be doubled, it would impact the final retail price by 0.7%. And that's not unusual. Typically, only between 0.5 and 3% of the cost of a garment goes on wages. Despite the introduction of codes of conduct over recent years, in the last 15 years, working hours have increased by more than 25%. The ILO maximum standard work week for industrial workers is 48 hours, but the sports goods industry, through the Fair Labour Association, unilaterally increased this to 60 hours, with additional overtime when it created the FLA Code of Conduct in the mid-1990s. And as a result, huge pressure was put on the governments of sportswear producing countries to legalise longer working hours. Long hours and low pay means that over 1/3 of female workers producing garments in Sri Lanka's free trade zones are suffering from chronic malnutrition. Due to unrealistically high production targets, many workers producing sportswear don't drink during the day so that they don't waste time going to the toilet, and they often avoid taking lunch and dinner breaks. Respiratory diseases due to high humidity and the constant inhalation of dust and fabric particles are extremely common, and in Bangladesh, tuberculosis rates are double amongst garment workers. Many workers only ever see personal protective equipment when auditors are due to arrive, and even then it's often ill-fitting and unsuitable. Across the garment and leather industries, there's huge hostility to workers exercising their right to join trade unions. Workers who establish or join unions are often threatened, harassed and dismissed, so understandably most workers are afraid to exercise their rights. The use of short-term contracts, sometimes lasting only a couple of weeks, is increasingly common in the garment industry, as brand orders are placed later and later and delivery schedules are shortened. In response to a survey carried out this year, 69% of the ITGLWF affiliates said that short-term and agency work had increased in the last year. Short-term contracts are also being used more and more as a way of getting rid of those who decide to organise to defend their rights. Workers whose contracts run out rarely have the opportunity to establish what was the motive behind the decision to let them go. So the Playfair Alliance was established in 2003, originally to push for an industry-wide solution to end the exploitation of workers producing clothing, footwear and merchandise for the 2004 Athens Olympics. At the time, the Playfair at the Olympics campaign was the biggest anti-sweatshop mobilisation ever, with 500 local campaign events across 35 countries and collecting more than 500,000 signatures in support of the campaign. The European Parliament passed a resolution supporting the campaign's aims. The British Parliament passed a motion supporting the campaign, and a bill entitled Playfair at the Olympics was introduced to the US Congress.